Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm Dr. Rhoda Bernard, founding managing director of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education and the assistant chair of the music education department at Berklee College of Music. And I am proud to present this podcast featuring disabled artists and arts educators. We are inviting artists with disabilities to be guest hosts for the Able Voices podcast. Today's guest host is Briana Raucci. Briana is a Connecticut-based artist specializing in film and digital photography, writing, and design. Briana also happens to have multiple disabilities. Over the years, Briana has self-described as a photographer, photojournalist, writer, graphic designer, UX and product designer, social media manager, artist, etc., but feels none of these titles fully embodies the creativity she is constantly trying to express in new ways. After in-depth creative exploration, doing both full-time and freelance work for over 13 years, Briana is now freelancing full-time, utilizing all of her creative abilities. Being a multi-passionate individual, this has allowed her to balance all of her creative endeavors and to add a few more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Able Voices podcast. I'm your guest host, Briana Raucci, a disabled artist, writer, and photographer living with cerebral palsy, epilepsy, endometriosis, ADHD, and more. Through my disability and art blog, I attempt to transcend ability and demonstrate my personal experiences. I share what it's like to navigate life with multiple conditions and use my skills as an artist to convey the challenges of living with disabilities in a way that everyone can understand, regardless of their abilities. Today I'm joined by someone who's doing exactly that through their music, Teddy Cosmo. Teddy is a New York-based singer-songwriter, producer, and disability advocate with cerebral palsy. Their work blends punk, grunge, folk, and alternative rock into an emotionally raw sound that speaks directly to the experience of being disabled in an ableist world. They've been releasing music since 2017, originally under the name of the Sadsaps, and have been pushing the envelope of representation for disabled musicians since high school. Playing guitar didn't come easily, but after years of practice, Teddy developed a unique technique that works with the tremors in their hands. They're also a Berklee College of Music graduate. In addition to their vulnerable songwriting, they've been vocal online about real-world accessibility barriers in the music industry. With their new EP dropping on May 30th, we're excited to dive into what's next for them. Teddy, I'm so glad to have you here. Let's start with your story. How did you get started with your musical career, and what was the early Sadsaps era like?
Yeah, so I got started by, I guess I grew up in a small town, so there wasn't too much music going around or going on in Muncie, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. It's middle of the state pretty much, and so what I would do is I would travel to State College where Penn State is because I had some friends out there that were my age and also played music. So I ended up, linking up with them and performing with them and sort of dipping my feet into the water, I guess. The early Sad Sap stuff was basically as bare bones as it could get because I was super new to recording, super new to any production stuff or anything like that. So it was really, really like folk centric. And I was just trying to, at that time, get as much music out as possible. So it was a lot of like continuous releases. Like there were numerous years where I would put out a record or two records or multiple EPs and just try to like keep everything going. And it was a lot of street performing too, like during the, I guess, like 20 from like 2017, so like post high school up through the next couple of years before COVID. I was busking every single day for the most part, and so it's a lot of long hours on the street, and it could be anywhere from like a shorter day was like 3 or 4 hours. Some of the longer days were like 12 or 13 hours, just like moving from spot to spot and kind of trying to support myself that way.
Wow. How did your body handle that busking for that long? That must have been tough.
Not well. It was, but I was kind of a little bit bonkers with the expectations that I set for myself.
Mm,
Back then, I did not have, I guess I didn't have as much like care or gentleness or like respect for my disability, and I guess tangentially my body as well. I would definitely push the envelope a lot because I was more concerned about you know, either making enough money to make rent or getting somebody to buy a CD or a shirt than I was about actually like listening to what my condition was trying to tell me, which was every single time to slow down and chill out.
Yeah, I feel like that's a common theme with people with disabilities is just pushing it as far as you can go because you want to prove yourself, right? You want to do as much as everyone else, but then your body's like, please stop immediately. This is too much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Was there a moment that made you realize music was the outlet you needed? You started when you were really young. Like, what inspired you?
Yeah, so I started playing guitar when I was 12. Basically, what happened was prior to my most recent like surgery, which was uh, like right around that time, I was about 12. I was into like wrestling and stuff. Like I was on the wrestling team and I like, physically active things, but and I had this surgery and it sort of set me back like significantly. I had to relearn how to crawl and how to kneel and do like transfers and any sort of like self-care, even things as basic as like, you know, for me that were regular, like changing or using the restroom independently,
Mm.
became not regular. So it was a long adjustment period, and I realized like, oh, okay, well, going back to that same level of like physical activity isn't really going to be an option due to the setbacks of the operation. It didn't go as well as what was projected, we'll say,
Mm.
be polite to the doctors. But I think essentially once it kind of clicked that like I, just like anyone else, still needed some sort of like expressive outlet to get all of the emotions and feelings out. I really just locked into music, and I would just practice every day. And I used to sit in my room at my parents' house with my little Xbox 360 on the YouTube app, watching videos of those guitar tutorials, and I would rewind them, and it sort of became uh, an outlet that the outlet that it needed to be, I guess I'll say.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I read on your Spotify profile that it didn't come easily because you had tremors and you developed your own style and everything. So, is there anything you had to do to adapt to playing because of your CP? Like, is there anything in particular that helped?
Yeah. So most of the way that I play, there's like little bits of adaptation within all of it. Like for example, I play bar chords really weird because my fingers don't extend in the same way that most folks would. And with the tremors, that's in the right hand. They're kind of, you know, my tremors are, they sort of decide when they want to do it. And so I realized that like holding a pick wasn't really a good option for me because I can't guarantee that I'm actually going to keep a grip on it.
Right.
So I went the sort of finger style route, but it's not like the individual finger picking like how a lot of people do. It's more of I'll use my whole hand and kind of use the tremors as an accent to the strumming because they're gonna do it anyway. So I figured I just have to kind of work with it. Now there's some things that like do get a little trickier with the tremors. Like if I'm playing electric guitar and playing lead, I have to really, really focus in so that they don't do it. Because that, a wrong note if you're playing something like a solo or something's way more noticeable than if you're just strumming. But I've learned that it makes for a sound that I like, but also people, if I'm playing live, they'll go, "Whoa, your hands look crazy. What are you doing?" You know, so
Yeah.
it's fun. It's a cool little difference, I think.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to incorporate your disability and just work with it. Because I've tried to play guitar so many times and my hand, just same as you, just doesn't do what I ask it to. So I think it's really cool that you incorporated that on purpose and make it a part of your sound that makes it so unique. So I can't wait to see you live one day. So
Thank you.
you've mentioned that you were inspired by artists like the Beatles, Nirvana, Mountain Goats, Elliott Smith. What have you drawn from their music and how do their styles influence your sound?
So I think the big thing that I'll pull from like bands that I like is, I would say, like my a huge focus for me is lyrics. Like I really like lyrics that are narrative and tell like a story, but can also, excuse me, can also be interpreted in multiple ways, so the listener can kind of take what they want from it rather than me, this is what you should get from the song, because that's kind of the cool thing about music. Somebody might have the same favorite song but for completely different reasons. And then as far as like sound stuff goes, once I really got into audio production, it was kind of like a rabbit hole where you can look at all these, or I could look at all these different bands that I had liked for years and years, but look at them from a different perspective,
Mm.
that I wasn't really noticing before. So anytime something sticks out and I go, oh, that, gave me like goosebumps, or that made me feel some type of way, I'll try and figure out exactly, like, if I were to boil it down, what is the core component that's causing that, and then see how I can like incorporate that into my own stuff.
That's really cool. That must be a great way to learn different techniques too, is, studying the greats, right? With for any art form and dissecting that and then, making it your own. That was actually you answered a question, if there was any themes that you find yourself returning to in your music. So you said that you take a lot of their lyrical and narrative stuff. Is there something you like to write about most for you?
Yeah, for sure. This is so funny. Somebody actually, on Instagram, a fan reached out and was like, "Hey, I'm doing, or I'm starting to like record stuff. Is there anything that you like? Do you have like motifs or anything you typically go to?" And I was like, "Yeah, for some reason I write about sleep all the time. I'm always referencing either like taking a nap or going to sleep or being tired. I don't know why. I think that's just maybe my body being like, "Hey, just a reminder, you're sleepy."
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's another common theme in disabilities is just we're constantly tired and fatigued. It takes a lot to be in a disabled body. And I think especially with CP, our muscles are overreacting and doing stuff that we're not asking it to all the
Right.
time. So it makes us tired.
Right. Yeah.
So you studied at Berklee, which is a cool full circle moment for the podcast. What was your experience like there, both as a musician and a disabled student?
Yeah. So just to clarify, so I'm actually still enrolled, so I've not
Oh,
yet
cool.
graduated. But I do their online program because living in New York, I was like looking at the accessibility options between like, or comparative to New York and Boston, and New York has a lot of really nice setups, a lot of work to do, but definitely better than a lot of places I've been. Being at Berkeley has been essentially a dream come true. When I was like 17 and like first going like through all the college options and everything, I really, really wanted to apply, but we couldn't afford the application at the time. And if we could have, and I got in, we wouldn't have been able to afford me going to like the main campus. But now that I have the option, I've learned things that I like didn't even think of. Like
Mhm.
I've had professors give me perspectives that have completely changed the way I look at not only like production and stuff, which is what I'm going for, but also composition and how everything is tied together. And I've also had the opportunity to talk to professionals in the industry and have professors that are, touring musicians with big bands that they are sort of going around the world with all the time, and have had classes where like somebody's in like an arena locker room because they had a gig or have one coming up. And so it's just been the most eye-opening experience, and it's pretty much everything that I was hoping that it would be when I was 17 and really like jonesing to go.
That's amazing. Have you found that your professors have helped or taught you anything about using your disability in your music or in your production or in the process at all? Like, have they been supportive of your disability throughout that process?
Well, so they definitely have been supportive. However, I think since I haven't, or at least as far as I know, I haven't had any disabled professors. So their perspective with like adaptation is different
Mm.
because they don't have like the direct experience to pull from. But that being said, they have, if I've asked a question on the production side, because I have, my like home studio, if I ask a question that, like, for example, along the lines of like vocal recording and say, well, I can't really do this because of limitations, they're always able to brainstorm with me
Mm.
and say, okay, what can you do? Or what is available to you? What resources do you have? And then sort of work with that. So in that way, they have, been entirely supportive and willing to think, I guess, outside of the box to figure out what will work.
That's amazing, and maybe one day you can use your experience as a disabled artist and do the same for, younger students and teach them from a perspective where you actually know what it's like to need the adaptation too. So that's a really cool thing, and it's great that they're, collaborating and brainstorming with you.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely a wonderful set of professors there and staff for sure.
That's great. So your new EP drops on May 30th, which congratulations for that.
Thank
Um,
you.
what can your listeners expect to hear in terms of sound, emotional arcs, storytelling, etc.?
Yeah. So this new EP that's coming out is a really stripped down folk EP. The reason for that being limitations with my hardware. My computer is about 5 years old and it's starting to slow down. So I've noticed, like, I was working on a bunch of other projects that have more tracks, and I noticed once I hit like the sort of like 10, 11 track mark, it will crash. So I was like, let
Mm.
me do a very basic sort of reverting back to what I used to do as the Sadsaps and when I was street performing and stuff, just a really stripped back folk sound. So this EP it's about 4 or 5 songs. Haven't decided yet if there's one that might be on the chopping block, but I'm actually gonna finish the track list today and see where it goes. It's gonna be a sleepy sound that's more of a rainy day feel and kind of relaxing music as opposed to the fully produced like rock or punk sound that I've been doing, recently.
That'll be awesome. It'll be like a serenade in your own home. Almost.
That's the hope for sure.
Okay, so we'll insert a piece of your music here. So, do you know which song you want to play?
Yeah, so what we'll play is a song called Summer Rain. And this song is essentially, for me, it's about not being able to get good rest and hoping that you can get good rest and sort of it's like a plea to sleep or to dream or to the essence of like being well rested. So it's a lot about staying up and just sort of the same stuff running around your head and hoping that maybe, just maybe, you'll finally be able to take a load off.
I love that.
You're like golden summer rain, or how it sounds on the window pane, but I'm still dreaming of the same old things. Like Rolling Stone and flying cars, or did we clone the movie stars? I wish I'd known the peace that you might bring. I'll leave the door open if you wanna stop by. I'll leave the door open if I cross your mind.
Thank you for sharing with that. That was an incredible piece. Really appreciate it. So, can you explain your songwriting process? How do you go from an idea to a feeling, and then to a finished track? What is that process like for you?
Yeah, for me, it all starts with voice memos on my phone. And what'll typically happen is I'll have something in my head and it'll be like a melody in my head first. And then I'll play like that over and over again in my head. And then eventually, the first thing I'll do is like just do a quick voice memo of me humming the melody. And then if I'm still feeling it once I get there, then I'll pick up a guitar or piano and sort of sit with it and see if I can get something. What I usually do is I'll say like random sentences in the melody until something sticks that I like. And then
Mm.
once I have something that I like, I'll build off of that. And I try to finish the song in a go. Like if I'm writing something, I like to try and sit down and get like, you know, the basic like skeleton of the song structure and lyrics out first. There was a in the Peter Jackson Get Back documentary, there's a clip where George Harrison and John Lennon are talking about writing music, and I think John says something along the lines of it's best to like finish it once you start it because it's harder to come back to. So I've
Mm.
tried to keep that in mind like anytime I'm writing anything. And then when it's time to actually record, that it will either go two different ways. I'll either work with my best friend and co-producer with a lot of projects, Chris Wood, and we'll record together, either me going to Pittsburgh or him coming to New York so that we can record in one of our home studios. Or if I'm self-recording, usually what I'll do is, find some drums, then record the guitar, and then once I have the guitar recorded, record another track for it, and just kind of try and build it piece by piece, and then sort of fit it all together. Then I usually take a couple days. Once I have like the basic tracking done, I'll give my ears a rest on that particular song for a few days, make sure I still like it when I come back to it. And then it gets to the point of like, all right, well, what's if this is a puzzle, what pieces are missing? What can I
Mm.
like fit in there to like really make it fuller and get the point across that I want to? And then after that is my favorite part, which is the mixing and mastering process, which is just making everything sound professional and pretty and nice and clean and polished.
That's a great process, and it's funny that you mentioned the Beatles and needing to kind of finish in one sitting and then taking a break and coming back to it. I do the same thing with my art, is kind of take a break because you're like, am I gonna hate this in a few days? Or,
Right.
you know? And I was gonna also say that it's a little bit Kurt Cobain like with the lyrics, just kind of like fitting in random stuff until it kind of works, and he would forget his own lyrics
Right,
while
yeah.
performing, and kind of just go with it. So I like your process. It's very interesting. And you mentioned your friend and producer that you work with. How do you think your work together shapes your sound?
Oh, yeah, that is a great question. I think that Chris and I working together has pulled me out of my comfort zone and expanded it like numerous times year after year. A lot of the reason on like with my catalog there's a lot of like genre shifting and hopping around is thanks to Chris's just like excellent brain, I guess.
Mm,
He can sort of see or hear what I'm trying to describe before it's actually recorded or played. So if I go, oh, what if we have something that sounds like this? He'll be able to get where I'm coming from, but also expand on it.
mm,
And then that actually brings me to another thing that I guess I'll announce it here. We're actually bringing the Sadsaps back uh,
nice.
for a full length record, which is gonna start being released in July. Um, and for this one, we did a lot of co-writing, just because we were able to lock in and bounce back and forth. It's like a game of ping pong essentially.
Mm,
And he'll think about things in a way that I don't, and vice versa, and it just leads to music that I'm happier with than if I were to have myself.
yeah, that's a beautiful thing about art in general and music and collaboration is, two heads are better than one, and especially people who come from different spots in life and just different life experiences, shape your art, and
Mhm.
having multiple perspectives really enhance art in general across all mediums. Switching gears a little bit into accessibility and, your industry advocacy. You've posted really powerful videos of yourself literally climbing upstairs to perform at inaccessible venues. What inspired you to share those moments publicly?
Yeah, for a long time I didn't want to,
Mm,
because I was like, "Oh, I'll try to keep it separate. I don't want people to like." I had this weird idea that if I showed much of the that side of things, then I didn't want people to like listen to my music just because of that. I wanted to try and get it heard based off of its own like musical merit.
mm,
And then what happened was COVID.
mm,
I got COVID two times, and I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it made things like just generally worse as far as my condition goes. Like, and what I realized once things started opening back up, oh, geez, I can't do the physical, like, demanding tasks of trying to perform in these spaces that aren't set up for me
mm,
anymore. Like, you know, and even when I first moved to New York, I would still try. Like the first year I lived in New York, I was gigging constantly and climbing up and down stairs and hopping onto stages and taking subways and climbing up subway steps to get to different gigs that I had to get to just because. And after a while I was like, this is one, exhausting for me, but two,
mm,
if I felt like if I didn't say something or show it, then nobody would know, because I wasn't seeing a lot of people at that time before I started. I wasn't seeing a lot of disabled artists, and now thankfully I've been able to meet handfuls, and it's nice. It no longer feels like I'm on some isolated little island where I'm trying to like punch up and break this like ceiling of limitation.
Mm.
So I just with like the climbing stairs videos and things like that, I was like, well, I have this footage of it, and like when I originally took it, it was like as like kind of the meme of like, isn't this ridiculous? But then I realized, oh no, it's not really a meme of how it's ridiculous. It's just kind of ridiculous. So I figured I'd share it, and I got a lot of people saying like, now I don't even want to go to a venue unless it's accessible, and that's like able-bodied folks saying that. And like I think
Mhm.
that's what we need is enough people to be like, you know, this should change so that it actually does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention to our listeners who don't know you, you are a wheelchair user, and that's why you've had to do these things. And I can't imagine how exhausting it is, especially when you're playing guitar and you're literally using your arms to climb up and down. Like that would be totally exhausting. And I was excited because when I started reaching out and talking about my disabilities, you were one of the first people with CP that I came across, and I was so excited to see someone talking about this stuff and showing what it was like because I'm not a wheelchair user. I wouldn't have even thought about like an inaccessible venue in that way. I've had inaccessible places myself for different reasons, but the idea of actually playing there and being able to have a show, I just think it brings and sheds so much light onto such an important subject. So you're doing a great job with all
Yeah,
that, and I
thank
really
you.
appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Have any venues or organizations reached out to you in response to those videos? And do you feel like it's led to any change or awareness?
So it has led to change in awareness, which is great. I've gotten connected with other disabled folks that are trying to put together accessible spaces, which is fantastic. As far as your regular run of the mill, like smaller artist venues that like I would be playing, it there hasn't been much change there. Now, I think a big reason for that is, you think about it, these venues have shows every week,
Mhm.
most days of the week, and I would say, like 99 out of 100 shows, they're not going to run across somebody with needs for adaptation, so they don't think about it. I do still have venues reach out and ask me to play, and then I'll be like, okay, great. Can you tell me like sort of what the accessibility situation is? And then a lot of times, unfortunately, what will happen is it'll be like the booking agent or the promoter, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not sure," and so then it kind of becomes my responsibility then to reach out to the venue directly and say, "Hey, I was asked to play this show. Before I commit to it, can I know like what the space is? Do you have a bathroom that I'd be able to use, or that other
Mhm.
disabled folks that want to come to the show would be able to use?" Because that's the other thing too. Even if I'm having a good day, and can push through and deal with the hassle of trying to get through and into a venue and play at a venue that's not accessible. I don't really want to play those shows anymore because I now realize that it's not really it's not rewarding for me to play a show that isn't accessible if I know that it's not accessible and a person like me or another person with a disability can't come to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to kind of set boundaries and show people that they need to have accessible spaces if they want disabled artists and disabled people to enjoy the work there. So that's great that you're spreading awareness in that way. What do you think true accessibility in the music world would look like to you in venues, festivals, and behind the scenes?
True accessibility would be accessibility for everybody, not
Mhm.
just like a certain subsect of disabilities, or like, yeah, we have wheelchair seating, but it's like, on the side of the stage or something like that, or
Right.
like, you're sort of jammed. in a corner where all the acts put their gear when they're on tour. And so it's really just, I guess, the like first building block of it would be reaching out to people in the industry with disabilities, because there are plenty of us. Like there's a lot of us that could be consultants
Mm,
for these venues. And I think part of it too is, you know, it would have to start, like everybody says, well, you have to start small with and like build from the ground up. But I think, interestingly enough, with music, it should honestly be the other way around.
mm,
It should be starting with your bigger venues, your venues that national acts and international acts go. Because if bigger venues are, fantastic with accessibility, then more disabled folks will attend,
mhm.
more disabled artists will be inspired to reach out to try and set something up to play there. And they have the budget and the ability to do so, whereas a lot of these smaller venues that are like bars or cafes or, just clubs don't. And as unfortunate as it is, money is a big barrier for these smaller locations to make the necessary adaptations that they would need to. So I think it has to come from the places that have the budget and the big pockets where they could make, some concessions with their profit margin to be able to accommodate.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I totally agree. And I think by the larger venues doing that stuff, they would set a standard or a precedent of what a venue should have, and kind of create a standard that everyone else would want to live by. Because of course, if that's the norm, then smaller venues are going to want to make sure that they're doing the same thing. So I agree. I think that's a great idea, is starting with the bigger venues, because like you said, money is a big part of it, unfortunately. And I think that's another thing that disabled people have come across as an issue a lot of times, is it's hard to even buy stuff for ourselves for accessibility and adaptation and all of that. So when people have the money to invest in disability and accessibility, it's very important that they take those measures.
Yeah, for sure, especially now with, the way things have been going as far as disability protections and rights go. Like it's it's going to be more heavily reliant on community to hold things together. So and even like with art specifically, like art is such a foundation of community and what keeps us all connected with each other. So it's important that it doesn't get forgotten about in those spaces.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely more work for the people and the community to make sure these things are upheld, but it's also our responsibility, for the future of disabled people, to make sure that we kind of hold them to these standards. Do you ever feel pressured to use your art as advocacy, or does it happen naturally?
Yeah, I do. Um, and I have for a long time. I used to really fight it. It definitely comes much more naturally than it used to, because now I like
Mhm.
to advocate and be loud about things, because it's frustrating and it's a good outlet. It gets people talking. If you're not upsetting somebody with the art that you're making, then I shouldn't say that. You can make art that doesn't upset people, but particularly with music, someone's going to get upset. And I figure that if I'm going to upset somebody with music, I would rather upset them in a way that makes them really like reflect, do some like
Mhm.
self-reflection on why they're mad. Cuz I have gotten people that have been like, "Hey, why should we pay attention to you just cuz you're in a wheelchair or whatever?" It's like, I didn't say that, but what makes you think that that's. So the more I've seen that, the more I've felt like, okay, this is good, this is like important, I should keep this going. And then also, I've now had a couple different people that haven't like released music reach out to me and ask for help or tips, or even like in some cases production work and stuff that I'll typically do pro bono just to get them off the ground a little bit. So that's sort of what keeps me going, is less for able-bodied folks and more for just, I guess, to try and instill confidence in other disabled artists. Like, yeah, you can do it, and like there's plenty of people that are doing it, and I'll be a person, for anybody in the community that needs help with something, to try and make sure that it happens. Because all I wanted when I was first starting out was like somebody, I guess, at the Grammys, you know, in a chair with a mobility aid to be like, hey, we need to do this. And,
Mhm.
we didn't have that.
Yeah, we get to be the people we wanted to see when we were younger, and set examples for, the next generation and everything by being advocates and being loud. And I think the best art does upset people
Yeah.
sometimes. I do think, art is supposed to emotionally evoke something. Powerful art always emotionally evokes something. So even if it's anger, you're doing something right, and it does, evoke self-reflection and stuff. So I think that's so important that you're doing that. How do you emotionally navigate performing in spaces that weren't designed for you, and, access it keeps your needs in mind?
I stopped doing it.
Yeah.
I used to just like grin and bear it. And the reason I don't really gig too much now, with a few exceptions, is because I I mean, one, it got really expensive. Like, if the subway station didn't go to, like, if there wasn't an elevator at the stop I needed it to go to, I'd have to call a cab,
Mm,
and that's really, really expensive. I wasn't making money necessarily at all these shows, and if I was, it wasn't as much as I was paying on for a cab there and back. So I essentially set a boundary for myself, which is still really hard to like stick to,
mm,
of, if my friend that's in a wheelchair can't come to it, not because of like a pain day or whatever, but just solely based off of the venue's own limitations, then I'm not going to play it. Because if, I might be able to hold my bladder for 5 hours to get through a set, somebody else might not have that luxury.
mm,
And increasingly, as I get older, I have less and less of that luxury.
right.
So it's more for, I guess, out of solidarity. It's like I don't want to play a spot that somebody else couldn't come to. When I was doing those shows, uh, I would just I would navigate it for the high of the performance. Like, it was like chasing that. Like, I'd be like, oh well, it sucks to have to crawl up these stairs or to climb over a bunch of stuff to get onto the stage. But at least for 30 minutes, I have everybody looking at me for reasons I want them to be instead of reasons I don't.
Mm, yeah, definitely. Based on that, what advice would you give to other disabled musicians who are just starting out, whether they're facing physical, emotional, or systemic barriers? Because, what you're saying, and kind of setting that boundary in solidarity, like, would you recommend that they do the same thing when they're young? Like, what would you say to them?
I would say the most important thing is to listen to your body and your brain, because artists a lot of times will listen to their heart or their emotions and what they want to do and what their aspirations are. If I had listened to myself when I was younger and doing all those crazy hours of street performing, maybe I'd be in a little better physical shape today. I have like two injured rotator cuffs, and that's fully from all the crazy stuff that I was doing and all the like extra pushing the chair around with the weight of the guitar, or climbing upstairs. Or I remember one time doing a rooftop concert back in this was probably 2017, but like climbing up through a window to get onto the roof, and then to plug in the keyboard, I had somebody holding my ankles so I could lean down to get the extension cord. Like, I was doing crazy things
Yeah.
that able-bodied people shouldn't even necessarily be doing. But
Right.
like, it's okay to have these barriers and your own personal barriers. It's not okay for these venues to have the barriers, but don't push yourself to fit into the mold of what the scene or the society or the neighborhood is saying you have to do to like make a splash in the industry. Because I've been doing this for, well, I'm 27, so like I've been releasing music for like 10 years. I'm a lot further along than I was 10 years ago, but I don't think that if I continued pushing and like didn't listen to my body, I don't think that if I was still playing these inaccessible venues, it would make me any further along. In fact, I think that it might even have caused more issues, because one of the reasons that I stopped was I noticed, oh, it's getting hard to even play. Like, there was a period where it was hard to play guitar for more than like 20 minutes without having like crazy nerve pain.
Mm.
That fortunately has gotten much much better, but only because I started listening to my body and taking my health seriously.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible point, and I completely agree with any art form and following your dreams that way. Listening to your body is so extremely important because, especially with CP, it is not a degenerative, condition or anything, but the body is inherently degenerative, and
Yes.
when you do things that even able-bodied people would be hurt from, like crawling through windows and stuff,
Yeah,
it's gonna hurt and it's gonna affect your body. And I think, young disabled people, it's hard to respect your body because the public doesn't really respect your body a lot of times. So it
exactly.
is hard, but I think that's great advice for younger people to really listen, to your body from a young age, and try to respect yourself as hard as it is, because it will benefit you in the long run to make sure you're working with your body rather than against it. And you don't need to prove yourself. You will prove yourself through your skills and your talents, and through being you and being authentic, I think. So I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, exactly. And with, with any disabled art form, we're going to have to pave our own way as disabled artists anyway. So you might as well pave your own way in a way that's comfortable and actually doable for you, rather than just saying, okay, well, I'll pave my own way, but I'm going to still do all the same like stuff that everybody else is doing. There's no handbook on any of this stuff. We don't really have, you know, a lot of people to look to for advice. So pave your own way in a way that works for you, and the right people will find your art, whether it's music or visual or digital art or film. Like, the people that are supposed to see it will see it. It's just a matter of finding the way that you can get it out there that preserves your ability to keep making it.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more questions, real quick. What helps you keep going on your hardest days, especially, when you're not feeling good and everything?
I think the main thing that helps me keep going would be the knowledge that I have now that like it has made some difference on like any scale. Like, now that I've had people reach out to me and that are also artists and say, "Well, thank you for doing this," or like, "I want to do it too." Like, that was always my dream. So like, even on the worst day, I can look back at that and be like, "Well, I have this. I did what I wanted to do." So I can keep pushing forward.
That's awesome. Where can people find your work and follow you, and how can they support you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that Instagram is probably by far my most active platform. And then as far as like streaming the music side of things, it's on all the platforms like Spotify, Tidal, Apple Music, all of those guys. Um, but yeah, if you want to check any of the advocacy stuff out or get in touch or anything like that, Instagram's definitely the best way to go.
Perfect. Well, I've had a great time guest hosting with Teddy today. If you're looking to find our work, you can find Teddy on Instagram, Spotify, and all the music platforms. And you can check me out at brianaraucci.com or on Instagram at Briana Raucci. Definitely go listen to their upcoming EP and support their work however you can. It's been a pleasure guest hosting Able Voices podcast. Be sure to check out my blog for a companion post about this conversation and more reflections on disability and art. Thanks for listening and take care until next time.
Able Voices is a production of the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education, led by me, Dr. Rhoda Bernard, the founding managing director. It is produced by Daniel Martinez del Campo. The intro music is by Kai Levin, and our closing song is by Sebastian Batista. Kai and Sebastian are students in the arts education programs at the Berklee Institute for Accessible Arts Education. If you would like to learn more about our work, find us online at berkeley.edu/BIAAE or email us at BIAAE@berkeley, that's LEE.edu.